Welcome to Three Distinct Knocks. I'm David Riley.
I'm Nicholas Harvey.
And tonight we have with us worshipful Baruti KMT-Sisouvong. And many of you may know Baruti because for a while he was in every Masonic Facebook group that existed trying to get people to respond to his survey. And so we're going to talk to him about his dissertation that he's working on, of which the survey was a part, and about the results of the survey. Welcome, Baruti.
Hello, guys. It's good to be here. Thank you for having us. It should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, he obviously hasn't watched enough of our episodes.
That's how you know they don't watch any of our episodes.
It should be a lot of fun.
I've seen one. I've seen the one with Chuck. He's a good guy.
Yeah. Well, you know, Chuck is always a good place to start. So we're going to start, as usual, with a rant. Tonight, it's me ranting. I think a part of the problem is that I spent a part of my formative years of my life as a member of a fairly high church Episcopal parish. Let me explain. The high church or Anglo-Catholic wing of the Anglican Communion has a deeply incarnational theology, which informs the praxis of the liturgy. In other words, they seek to involve the whole person in the rituals of the church. We experience the faith through what we hear, what we see, what we smell, what we taste, and what we touch. Every sense brings us a message, and ideally that message tells us that we are in a sacred space and approaching the divine. As a result, when I attend lodge, I am perhaps somewhat more sensitive than some to the messages being sent by the surroundings. When the ritual is performed as if the goal is to get the words out as quickly as possible, it sends a message. When our lodge rooms are dusty and filled with broken chairs, it sends a message. When we decorate our lodge rooms like a basement rec room from the 1950s, it sends a message. When we rush through mediocre meals served on paper plates with plastic forks, we are sending a message. Before I'm accused of elitism, let me say that I'm not saying you have to spend money on expensive china or build a multi-million-dollar building to house your lodge. I'm just saying that you have to look like you care. I once asked a priest in a church I was attending why they went through the trouble of baking bread for communion instead of using those communion wafers like everyone else. She paused, thought for a moment, and then said, "It is difficult enough to discern that the bread is the body of Christ without first having to struggle to discern that it is bread." Strip away all the extras from Freemasonry, and what you have, I believe, at its core, is an initiatory experience intended to convey to a man an understanding of mature masculinity, and that provides an opportunity for a mystical experience that cannot be had elsewhere. Behind the titles, under the costumes, hiding beneath the piles of minutes and motions to pay the bills, that's who we are. It's difficult enough to discern the importance of Freemasonry without first having to discern that Freemasons believe it to be important. I will never forget the first time that I, as master of the lodge, made a Mason. Mystical experiences are, according to some definitions, ineffable. Despite knowing this, I will attempt to give you a sense of what I experienced. In other words, I'm going to try to F this. At the moment when that man was becoming a brother, I had a strong sense of stepping out of time and space. It was as if I could feel the 134 masters of my lodge that had gone before me in the lodge room with me, along with all those brothers whose tie to me as a Mason stretches back literally to time immemorial. The experience of that moment, that sense of timelessness and connection, that feeling of being a small part of something vast and significant is burned into my consciousness. It stands out from other experiences like that moment when the movie version of The Wizard of Oz switches from black and white Kansas to the Technicolor of Oz. Every Mason should be afforded the opportunity to have his own experience of that sort. That experience can be had in the most humble of lodge rooms. I love our grand temples. I love Corinthian Hall. I like the tuxedos and the silver jewels hanging from impressive collars. I love organ music, but none of that is essential. What is essential is care. We have to offer our best, give generously of ourselves in time and effort, do our best to make the sensory experience of lodge live up to the promise of the ritual. Freemasonry teaches us that we are immortal souls, occupying for a time flesh and blood and bone. But I know of no means of touching a man's soul save through his senses, seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting. These are the messengers we must use to carry the lessons of our fraternity into the minds and hearts of our candidates, our members, and our officers. Take a breath and deliver the ritual with feeling and meaning. Take a look at the lodge room and clean it, paint it, repair it, care for it. Make an effort to show that the intent of your lodge is serious, that your purpose is solemn. Consider the message you deliver by your surroundings, the manner in which you perform the ritual, the meal you serve, the jokes you tell, and the care you give the furnishings of your lodge. And then, perhaps, I will have the opportunity to see even more of my brethren standing with me outside time and space and marveling at the wonders before us. So, Baruti, you're our expert on mystical experiences in Freemasonry now.
Here we go. Well, I feel honored to be in a position to actually conduct this research. It came about in a very organic way. My advisor, Dr. Fred Travis, he has been really a very, very powerful mentor, since I began the MA program and, of course, the PhD program. And when I approached him about my topic, because they knew when I applied to the university for the program, they knew that I wanted to do something of this sort. And, they were like, yeah, sure, okay. And he was so excited about it that when I went to him after class one day asking him, would he serve as my advisor, before I posed the question, he said yes 3 times. And I didn't realize until the 3rd time that he was agreeing to serve as my dissertation advisor. And that was 2010. And then, of course, I began all the, going through the TAing, everything, working with him in terms of neuroscience and recognizing the brain. So all of this came about because of my own experiences within Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism as a student of Rosicrucian Order Amorc out of San Jose. And when I talk with gentlemen and brothers about their experiences, I've come to know conclusively that brothers across the board are having experiences. Now, yes, there are some brothers within the craft who don't believe that it's possible to have these experiences, that there's nothing mystical about Freemasonry. And when that happens, when I hear that, I simply say, well, let's take a look at what some of the early Freemasons have had to say about what we classify today as mystical experiences. So my advisor, again, was just very supportive of this research. He even suggested I use the scale that the survey will know of. It's from Dr. Ralph Hood. He's out of UT Chattanooga, Tennessee, and University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and he is the really foremost researcher in terms of this discussion of experiences of this type. And no one had done anything with Freemasons or Rosicrucians that I'm aware of in terms of the literature. So Dr. Travis mentioned the survey to me, and I said, that's a great idea. And it just kind of developed organically. So technically speaking, the dissertation will have 3 components to it. The first of which is a textual analysis of early Freemasons and Rosicrucians' experiences as they describe them of the mystical. The second is the survey, which is a 32-item questionnaire that people have answered, brothers have answered, and of course, women and men amongst Rosicrucians have answered in terms of their own experiences. The third component of it is those 95 people of the 148 that have responded to the survey that actually documented their experiences. And what I can say is that, you know, you have an experience in Freemasonry and you think you're alone. I like what Chuck Dunning says when he came here to Cambridge and spoke at Amicable. He talked about the craft and finding the fraternity, the philanthropy, and the philosophy. The first two he found easily, but the third less so. And I was lucky enough when I was raised August 18, 2009, to fall in, and again in Iowa, fall in with a good group of brothers that brought me along, both within the ritual, the surface aspects, and the depth. And it all organically developed in terms of this dissertation. And the whole idea behind it is really to examine what we classify in Vedic science, or Maharshi Vedic science, the experience of pure consciousness, but also as it is described within secular thought and life systems. And I prefer the secular thought and life system as, again, Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, because those are, say, systems beyond religion. They're not anti-religious. They're religious in their own way, but they're not tied with a specific religion. The whole idea is to go into it and understand what's there. And again, you know, putting together the survey, the questionnaire, blasting it out on Facebook. And I appreciate everybody who responded. I appreciate those who sent me private messages and shared their experiences that were even reluctant to take the survey, but later chose to do so because of the nature of the experiences they'd had and what we're doing in terms of the research. So I hope I answered your question.
Did I ask a question? I don't remember.
Dude, I'm just loving it, man. You just keep talking.
So let's start with something really basic, because in thinking about talking to you about this, I remember my my professor for my comparative philosophy of comparative religion class, Dr. Stephen Miller. And he provided a definition for a mystical experience that I disagreed with strongly. And I fought with him for the next 3 years over it, I think. I'm nothing if not tenacious. But how would you define a mystical experience? What makes an experience a mystical experience?
The best way that I can, many people would offer an explanation for that. For me, I just simply say, when you have an experience where, for want of a better way of saying, you step outside of time and space, where you are, in the case of Freemasonry, you are transported to another time and another space when you're experiencing the ritual, when you're giving the ritual. There, I believe, is something there that requires deeper analysis and exploration in terms of the ritual itself, the symbols. I suspect there may be triggers there. I'm looking to understand that a bit more deeply. But mystical experience for me is any experience that initially catches you off guard, that leaves an indelible impression on you in terms of your thinking, your actions, and how clearly you see the world around you. Something so simple as get a tree, realizing that you can fell that tree and the tree is gone. You can then fell every tree in the area such that there are no trees. And that can be the case for years. Yet at no point have you impacted the law that governs the growth and flourishing of the tree. One could classify that as a mystical experience because all of a sudden you stumbled into something that you hadn't thought about before, but in examining a tree, you come to know that there's a fundamental connectedness that's there. And one could argue that that connectedness is intelligent, and you have always been a part of it, and you've been socialized to think, or Don Miguel Ruiz refers to it in the Four Agreements, you've been domesticated to think that you are apart from as opposed to a part of. So that it's a dawning, if you will. It's a crack in a cosmic egg. All of a sudden, you realize that there's more to life, and you begin asking more questions. That introduction, if you will, to thinking and being a different way in the world could be classified as mystical.
I've always my one of my favorite science fiction authors is Philip K. Dick, and he had an experience. He was writing one day at home. The doorbell rang. He went to answer the door. There was a woman at the door. He opened the door, and in that moment, he had an experience that it would be easy to argue destroyed him. Had a mystical experience, and it involved him seeing the light glinting off her necklace, and he wrote about it over and over because he's a writer, right? So he wrote about it, but he always said, "I've never managed to capture even a part of what that felt like, a part of what that did to me." And he spent the rest of his life trying to recreate that experience, he did many inadvisable things in pursuit of that experience again. Drugs, sort of extreme yogic practices. He really, he chased that experience for the rest of his life, and much of his writing centers on that experience. I think for me, for a mystical experience to be mystical, there has to be that sense of the extraordinary in it.
Yes.
And it's really hard to put into words, which is why, sometimes people include the word ineffable in the definition of it. That sense of something extraordinary, that sense of something completely beyond what you have ever experienced in any other place. To this day, when I walk into Amicable Lodge, and if I'm on the east side of the altar, there's a little piece of me that, like, the hairs on my arm go up because that's where that happened to me. The hairs on the back of my neck go up because that's what it wasn't. I mean, it's easy to describe it in pleasant terms, but there was also something slightly frightening about that sense.
I think the issue of it being frightening comes because it's a novel experience. I mean, there's not much in our common parlance that really allows us to understand this on a deeper level. You have to go into various orders and squirrel yourself away from society and to kind of go into books and think deeply about it. And that's why I find many people, I know some people often refer to the world as being filled with mud. There's just a lot of stuff out here that you can become so enmeshed in that you kind of lose yourself. When you have an experience such as that, it can be jarring. It's a spontaneous experience, and you didn't seek to cultivate it. It just descended upon you. One could argue also that it surfaced within you. You've never not had the capacity to have these experiences, yet through certain rituals, through certain thought processes, you can slip into them. And in slipping into them, you are irrevocably changed. As in the case of yourself walking into Amicable Lodge, you go to that exact space, and there you are having that experience again. It leaves this impression on you that compels you to ask more questions. And in asking more questions, you can't but walk away from that thought experiment a bit more energized, a bit more enlivened. And I argue, in some cases, serving as a point of reference of what's possible by simply engaging in that quest. Because many people, for whatever reason, fear it to even begin the process. But when they slip into it in a spontaneous way, it draws you in, and it draws you in very tightly, because that is an experience, a singular experience that will allow you to be your best and your highest self. You can't have that experience and ever be the same again. I think it was Oliver Wendell Holmes said, a man's mind stretched by or to a new idea never returns to its original dimension. So once you have the experience, you can't unsee that. You can't unlearn that. You become, as Joseph Ford Newton said, a conscript in service to that, which is larger than you. You are a conduit through which that makes its way into the world around you, not merely for your benefit, but for that of others. So I would argue that your experience with Amicable is infused in many ways in your life to make you even better Mason.
So, Baruti, let's talk more specifically about the survey.
Yes.
What were the results? What did you learn from the survey?
That there are brothers, and in the case of Rosicrucians, women having experiences that they didn't quite know what they were. We had 319 people that were interested in the survey. We had 280 people. 280 people about some people we had to do what's called data scrubbing. So the numbers ended up being 184 people. We actually have a good number, not people saying, "Oh, I don't believe in this," or my dog did this, just kind of mucking with the data. So it's a data scrub. So we had 148 Freemasons that responded. We have 36 Rosicrucians that responded. And so far, looking at the numbers, we're going through them. We're spending the next couple of months going through the data, but preliminarily speaking, there's some statistical significance that's happening in terms of experiences. Now, as far as additional research, we'll have to go into as to how and why in terms of answering those questions. And I recognize that because of the nature of our oaths within Freemasonry, some of the discussions will only be able to be had in a tiled lodge and or in a research lodge for obvious reasons. But there's something that's happening there, and we want to explore it a bit further, because right now the numbers, again, the people that took the survey, the numbers are very compelling. And the stories, the personal stories, about 95, I believe it is, reading through them, I'm literally in awe, because there are people that are having experiences. And it stands to reason when you think approximately 45% of the American population, they've had experiences that one could classify as mystical, but they themselves don't know what it is. And they then recounted, and then they realized something significant happened with them. And so the numbers thus far look really good. And I'm looking forward to finishing the dissertation and making the information much more widely available, because these are discussions that I think as a craft we need to have, because we're providing these opportunities for men to have these experiences. It's there. We just have to be willing to talk about it. And I'm glad those who shared their experiences did so, because I think it opens the door for those who may be incredulous about the possibility of having a mystical experience via the craft itself. It opens the door for the possibility of the discussion to be broadened and to recognize that there's more in the craft than many modern Masons realize.
You've mentioned early Masonic authors and their experiences.
Yes.
What did you find when you were looking at that? Is there a correlation between what they are saying and what Masons in the modern age are saying via your survey?
Oh, absolutely. Give an example. There's Joel Goldsmith, Freemason. Some of you may not know that he's a Freemason, but he's a Freemason, similar to Goethe. But going through their experiences of this moment of falling into a space of no things, or falling into a space of absolute silence, or one person referred to it as just being conscious of being conscious, being in a void. This is what you're hearing in some of the early texts. And even more contemporarily, brothers are having experience. One gentleman in the survey, he talks about how he had 25 years prior, on a particular night, he had received the Middle Chamber Lecture. On this particular night, 25 years later, his 25th anniversary, he was giving the Middle Chamber Lecture. And in this moment, everything, it was a full lodge, everything fell away. And it was just he and the two candidates the two brothers that were going through the Middle Chamber Lecture. It was just he and them. And it was just this experience of being in this void, is the term he used, of having this experience, of just being there. And how at the end, but in that moment of it, it was as if the three of them understood what happened. And he didn't go into any detail about whether he spoke with the two brothers afterward, whether they had a similar experience. Yet the look on their faces suggest they too had the exact same experience of everything falling away. So you have experiences such as that talked about early on. You have it being spoken about contemporarily. And again, this is across, a couple hundred years that these things are being discussed. And I find it fascinating that in our modern time, there are brothers who are reluctant to have a discussion about it on one level, but on another level, I think it's important to actually broach and kind of encourage brothers to actually have the conversation. Because again, there's much more to the craft than many of us realize.
So something interesting you mentioned is that I didn't realize when I was contemplating on all this is that it's not just the initiates or the candidates that get the experience. That it could be a guy delivering a lecture or even just taking part in a degree or watching it.
I think the opportunity exists for anyone who's in a tiled lodge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to remember something you said in Nicholas, in Chuck's interview. You talked about how, I think it was you or your brother, said that as a candidate, you're going to be a candidate one time. Yet, if you choose to serve as an officer in the line and attend lodge regularly to experience the ritual, you will experience it as many times as possible. There's a layering effect, I suspect, within the ritual that as this information is planted within your subconscious mind, more and more is revealed to you each time you experience it. It's akin to reading a good book. You love a particular book, you gain something from it for the first time. You approach it again a couple of years later, you gain some additional information. A few more years later, you're wondering, well, how did I miss that then? If the ritual is done well, it's the same ritual. But what's changed is you, because this information has had an opportunity to seep into your awareness. You find these moments of clarity that surface throughout your day, throughout your life. And it is as a result, I will argue, as a result of experiencing the ritual, not merely just one time, but experiencing it multiple times. I believe there's a reason why we are charged the way we're charged when it comes to the ritual. I believe there's a profound reason there. And I believe it has something to do with the layering effect of the ritual. And as we experience it consistently, regularly, all 3 degrees, there's more and more and more that's revealed to us, again, akin to reading a really good book and approaching it multiple times.
Do you think we would benefit if we told the initiates that I don't want to say if we warned, but if we prepared them that you may have a mystical experience, or so that they could kind of prepare for it, or should we let it happen by itself?
You broke up there for a moment. You repeat that, please?
Sorry about that. So I was questioning whether you think it would be a good idea for us to, if we should prepare the candidate and say, look, you may have a mystical experience and et cetera, or if it should just happen on its own and we shouldn't kind of give them a heads up.
That's a good question. Now, I know my experience the night I was raised, August 18, 2009. I'll never forget it. And that's a touchy, subject, because some guys may be skittish about that. They have approached a deeper understanding of consciousness or interconnectedness of humans. They may never have thought about it in that way. And so I think maybe if you have a candidate that has a proclivity in that direction, you can talk with them, or you can just make a blanket statement, something along the lines of, Freemasonry, affords an opportunity to delve deeply within. And, if you, would like to discuss your experiences afterward, there are brothers here who are willing to talk with you about it. And of course, have brothers there that are capable of talking about the subject in that manner with them. I think that's important. Because think of it this way, if you say to them, you may have an experience, is the brother going to be upset the candidate, is he going to be upset when he doesn't have it? Because he may not have it that night. He may have it 2 weeks later. He may have it a month later. He may need to see the ritual 33 times to have the experience. It's going to depend on the person. So that's a good question. I'm not sure how one could institute anything such as that. I think just simply saying that, if you would like to discuss your experiences afterward, there are brothers here who can talk about it. I would leave it blanketed that way. So I'm doing it.
I found your comments about the ritual being like reading a good book interesting, in part because I'm a fan of Derrida when it comes to literary criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And Derrida says that literature is the process that happens between the reader and the text.
Yes.
And therefore, by definition, you can never read the same book twice. Because by having read it once, you've changed.
Absolutely.
And your experiences. And it occurs to me, I've argued for years, and some of my friends will say ad nauseum, that there is value in coming to see the ritual over and over and over and over again.
Oh, yes.
And that every time I see it, sometimes, quite often it's the candidate that causes the effect. But I'll notice something new, or I'll see something in a different way than I ever did before. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you that there's a layering that happens there. And I wonder, one of the reasons I became a Freemason finally, after choosing not to for a long time, was because I remember the men who were my advisors when I was at DeMolay. Yes. And they were, there was something that they all had in common about them, which was sort of a kind of gentleness of spirit and an approach to enjoying life that I envied, that I thought was worthy of emulation. And I wonder if the part of it is that the rituals, to use a good Masonic analogy, chisels away at us until it leaves us with that core.
I agree with you completely. You may know the story. There's a reported story that Michelangelo, in terms of carving David, he's asked this question of, how did you come to carve David?
What's the model for that?
And his reported response was something akin to, I didn't carve David. David was in the stone. I just removed the excess. Yeah. And I believe in relation to us as Freemasons, what the ritual can do, if you allow it, is to remove these calcifications from your mind. And the calcifications come as a result of accepted social structures, our behaviors within those social structures, those ways of being that we're taught early on about what we should or shouldn't do, what we should or shouldn't accept. This is why I love what Bob Davis talks about in one of his pieces about how Freemasonry, you are divested of the rags of your righteousness. Oh, I love that line. The rags of your righteousness. Because you have to be divested of the external stuff before you begin to get to the internal stuff. Because if a man, this is why I love what the craft says, no one is accepted for the outer stuff. That is taken away. But when you get into the inner stuff, the things that we've thought all along, as from children up to young men, those have to be chipped away. And I believe that the ritual does that in a very profound way when it's done well. And this is why my mentors in Iowa, Larry Patrick, Frank Wilson, Charlie Wolf, Tom Brown, Don Hall, these guys, most of whom are World War II vets. I was one of the youngest guys in my lodge, and I was raised in August 18, 2009. And so these guys taught me the importance of giving good ritual, of giving ritual with passion, understanding the inner workings of the ritual. So I'll forever remain thankful to those guys. Why? Because they brought me along the way when it came to ritual and the importance thereof. While some men may argue against it, I really firmly believe, and my research data suggests that there is this layering effect that is occurring over time with repetition of the ritual, either experiencing it or delivering it.
So why is it important to have an experience like this? What does it do for me to have had an experience like this?
Freemasonry is really about taking good men and making men better. We have in society a need, I believe, of men being better, people being better. And the ritual has an opportunity, provides an opportunity rather, for that to occur, and then occur in a very powerful way. And so when we avail ourselves of the ritual itself, that process, I believe, begins and with repeated exposure continues. So it's important, not just within the lodge room, because you're not just a Mason within the lodge room, you're a Mason in society. And so if the teachings, if the information that is seeping into your awareness is not serving you outside the lodge room, I'd argue that you are more outside the lodge room than you are in the lodge room. So that teaching that you're exposed to within the craft should carry with you everywhere you go. You know, charging you to stand, always be upright, stand and act as such. This is what we're supposed to do. It's not just in the lodge room. It's not just in our families. It's also online within social media. It's also in, as we go about our daily lives. It should be with you everywhere. And you need not tell anyone that you're a Mason. You know, I can think back to my grandfather, whom I didn't learn was a Mason until I was raised, and told my mom I was going to a meeting once, and she said, you know, your granddad was a Mason. The moment she said it, everything about my grandfather clicked. Every single thing about him clicked. It made perfect sense. I got it. My dad wasn't a Mason. So my dad was that generation, you know, that where Freemasonry kind of just jumped over. But I understood my grandfather in a much more powerful and profound way because I later understood that he was a Mason.
Can you expand on that more if you're comfortable with doing so? I mean, you can't just say that and then you're skipping.
Oh, okay. Well, the way he would do things, the way he was one of those guys that if you're going to do something, do it right the first time. He would use the word half, hyphen, and you can fill in the rest there. Don't do things that way. You want to do it completely. One of our brothers, Rashid Bey in New York, in his signature of his email, he says, if you want square work, you don't cut corners. If my grandfather, you know, if he embodied nothing, he embodied that. If you want square work, you don't cut corners. And the importance of doing things right the first time. You need not go back over it if you do them right the first time. And that was something that was inculcated in my mom, because my mom would complain about going to all of the Eastern Star stuff with my grandmother. And, you know, she hated wearing the dresses and just everything. Those cotillion things she would go to. She hated that stuff. But even with my mom, that idea of doing things right the first time was transferred to us. I'll share a funny story. When I was growing up, I was charged with the responsibility of cutting the grass. And, you know, it was a modest sized home and, you know, yard. There was a time I began cutting the grass, and my mom liked the lines to be just right when cutting the grass. It couldn't just be willy-nilly. And one time I cut the grass and I missed several spots because I didn't line it up correctly, but I was rushing and I missed several spots. She said, oh, so you're done with the grass? Yes. I said, sure, yeah, done. She says, really? I said, yes. She says, look out there again. I look out there and I see what I didn't see. I saw what I didn't see then as I was doing it. And she says, well, go out there and do it again. And so in my infinite wisdom, I thought I was just going to go over to hit the few spots that, you know, were messed up. You know, I'm like 13, 12 years old. No. I had to start at the edge of the grass and do everything in order all over again because I didn't want the lines to be messed up. Later, she said it wasn't so much about the lines. It was about instilling in you the importance of doing things right the first time. And again, much of what that was the story of my life growing up and why I do things the way that I do them now. And I'm thankful to my mom and dad for that. And of course, my grandfather. That is something that was, my mom picked up from my grandfather, from her dad. So that him being the way he was as a Mason, as a man, that was something that was transferred to his daughter and then transferred to us. So again, there's something that was there. And when my mom shared with me that my granddad was a Mason, it made complete sense as to how she was reared, how she reared us. And that to me speaks to the power of the craft in terms of the lessons and how when we take it serious, the benefit that we accrue, but not only, us personally, but those in our midst. That's why I said earlier that you're a Mason, not just in a lodge, you're a Mason, when you're out in society as well.
So what in the survey surprised you? What were you not expecting?
That's a good question. I don't know that was, I think that wasn't expecting. Well, I guess there was. The people who would take the survey and just give gibberish responses just to muck with the data, things like that. I was a little surprised by that. But then again, I'm trying to muck part. I didn't think people would spend that much time to answer a survey just to muck with the data. That was the part that was a bit surprising because I'm like, who has that kind of time on their hand? I don't. I'm busy reading and trying to figure things out. And that was the one thing that surprised me. But then again, who's to say they were Masons and people who trolling the boards on social media and seeing the craft and they like it, they become a part of the page and they're exposed to the information. And as a result of that, they decided to take the survey. But once that data was removed, it was a non-issue. And again, it basically can be confirmation bias on my part, but I know my early experiences with Freemasonry and the experiences I've heard from other brothers before the survey, and it illustrates that there's definitely something happening within the craft, and there needs to be more research on it. So I'm looking forward to that.
I think, too, some of that response may have been from the fact that people do find this stuff threatening. I mean, they find it threatening when it happens to them sometimes.
You talking about Masons?
Anyone can find discussion of mystical experience, discussion of that personal relationship with the divine, that being touched by something beyond yourself, gnosis, as some people would call it, all of that kind of stuff. Pile it all in a big box and label it scary for a lot of people, because even if they've had the experience, Philip K. Dick is a good example. He was entranced by the experience and addicted to the experience in a sense, but he was also terrified by the experience. I think for a lot of people, it's a difficult subject. It's something outside of. It is by definition something that is not subject to our rational examination. Sorry, Baruti, despite your best efforts to get good data, I think it is something other. And that's threatening to a lot of people's worldview. So I'm not surprised that there were people who reacted that way. And of course, Masonic Facebook groups notoriously, I would argue are 1/3 non-Masons. So
yeah, yes,
you get what you get. But
so you're right. I agree with you on that. And what I can say is that despite those who chose to respond to the survey and sought to influence the data, thankfully there's a thing called data scrubbing. And you're right about people who may be fearful of it. It's a different paradigm. I think it was Structured Scientific Revolutions. Thomas Kuhn talks about that. It's a different paradigm. It's a different way of thinking about oneself, the world. I think on some level, maybe, just maybe, there's a level of responsibility that one, descends upon someone when you have this experience or that surfaces within you. you have a level of responsibility at that point. You can't, nor should you, go around being the same way you were prior to the experience. Because again, you can try to act as if you've not had the experience. You can try, but ultimately you're being disingenuous to yourself. You're being disingenuous to what the possibilities are within the craft. And you're being disingenuous to those around you. Because again, if we accept that something is happening within us, that the possibility is there for us to be better, to do better, when you have an experience such as this, I think it compels you to do something differently. I like what Albert Pike says, and one of your favorite quotes, David, I understand. What we do for ourselves alone dies with us, yet what we do for others in the world outlives us and is immortal. Pike is one of my favorite Masonic scholars and thinkers. There are others as well, but his body of work, that passage alone is so powerful because it illustrates how we as humans, we have a tremendous amount of capacity. And when we accept the possible beyond us, for us, it is something that will outlive us and come to serve as a point of light, a point of reference for people, 500 years from now. And so it's one of my favorite quotes, many by him, but that's one of my favorites, primarily because you come to serve as a point of reference. And while people may be afraid of this information, there's really nothing to fear except fear itself.
Mm-hmm. So for anybody listening that wants to experience a mystical experience, either themselves or they want to provide it to a candidate that might be going through their lodge, or they want to find a community, a website, a place they can go and learn more about this, what do you think where they should go? How can they start?
For me, Masons, study the ritual. Study the ritual. Ask deeper questions about the ritual. Be willing to participate in the ritual, even if it's on the sidelines, observing the ritual. At home, pull your ritual book out and just study it. There's so much wisdom there that it can't but transform your thinking. Because again, think of it this way. Every action is preceded by a thought. Every action is preceded by a thought. When you understand that, if you want to change how you are in the world, you have to have new information. It's the principle of the second element is referred to. You have to have new information upon which to gnaw that you can think about and thus change your actions. So the ritual, again, has this chipping away process that occurs as a result of repeated exposure. You're going to learn something new each time you really go through and you really think about it. So I'd say as Masons, study the ritual first. Then find brothers, whether it be in social media, whether it be in your lodge, whether it be in your jurisdiction, that they themselves are having some discussions such as this. Find the various groups that are interested and are asking the deeper questions. I mentioned Goethe earlier. Goethe, he was a part of his lodge in what's now the Weimar Republic, Lodge Amalfi. And he was a part of what's called a Masonic Select Society. And what I thought was interesting about his work, one of the writers referred to him being a part of this Masonic Select Society to remove the dross of Freemasonry, to remove themselves from the dross. And I thought it was a really powerful analogy because the dross, we know, when you remove ore from the earth, you have to heat it at a specific temperature to remove the dross, the impurities, to get to the essence, the pure aspect of it. So Goethe was about that. He was really about asking the deeper questions in terms of Freemasonry. So there are brothers, I believe, in every jurisdiction, some of them quiet, some of them less so, that are asking these questions. And I think it's to the observant, the keen Mason, that will spot them. And if they themselves are interested, start asking questions. You need not be boisterous about it because it's not about being boisterous. It's about making yourself available to the information. And plus, two, going to a rare bookstore, walking in a rare bookstore, finding some of the old authors. I mean, people like Manly Hall. I mean, geez. I shared today on social media his The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, one of my favorite books by him. Many other pamphlets as well, and books, and of course, the Secret Teachings. just be willing to ask the deeper questions. Be unafraid, because what you're going to do is uncover your highest and your best self. The craft provides that opportunity. Encoded within, I believe, the teachings in the craft are profound universal truths that if we open ourselves to them, we can't but become an exponent of them.
But it's not just within Freemasonry, right? If
Absolutely
somebody was
not.
listening,
It's within Rosicrucianism as well.
yeah,
Golden Dawn. It's in most of those groups. They're there. Bota is another one. Take a look at Franz Barden's work. Take a look at Paul Foster Case's work. I'd say take a look at the Yogi Publication Society's works. I mean, beginning with the Kabbalion. Kabbalion is an amazing read when you get into the 7 Hermetic Principles. So there are many texts out here. William Walker Atkinson's works and under the many pseudonyms he used in terms of his writing. There are many writers out here who've done what Pike talked about, leaving something behind that other future generations will find. You can look at just that there's so much out here. The moment you open yourself up to the possibility, you're going to be inundated. You're going to cross the path of people, of books. The moment you open yourself up, I think it was Goethe who said, the moment you open yourself up and choose to do something such as this, it's almost as if the universe conspires to make this thing a reality for you. But you have to first be open to it. And when you're open, I can remember times being in bookstores, wanting to find a particular book, and then walking in randomly in a bookstore in Atlanta or in Chattanooga or in Nashville or in Kansas City or St. Louis or Seattle, and finding books that I'm like, wow, I've been looking for this book. And in some cases online, it's ridiculously priced, yet I find it for a pittance in this bookstore. Mm-hmm. So I firmly believe, and my experience suggests, and speaking with others, that they themselves have had similar experiences, that the moment you open yourself up to the possibility, note the possibility here, you can begin to note the probability of something happening, and with regular movement in that direction, you begin to note the inevitability. The big hurdle for many people is going from something that's impossible. And I say to take the first step from impossible is just shift the word around. Add an apostrophe between the I and the M and a space between the M and the P. And it goes from being impossible to I'm possible. And the moment you do that, you open yourself up to the reality that you are, in fact, more than the sum of your parts. You are more than the sum of your parts. And once you come to understand that and accept it, let's just say all bets are off as to you ever being the same again. You're going to be better. You can't but be better by virtue of the craft.
I love the stuff you mentioned, the thing you put on Instagram, and I love all the stuff you put on Instagram. My fiance doesn't, because what ends up happening is 2 days later I have a package in the mail from Amazon.
I'm sorry.
And I can't be the only one that just like, all right, well, if he likes it, buy it now. Because like you said, it's crazy how many people don't know that Amazon, you could search for a book and it's, $30, $20, whatever it is, but you could buy it used for $3.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It's the craziest thing. So we're going to link a description. We're going to link to your Instagram page below. But in case someone is driving or something, do you want to just give a shout out to it? I think it's amazing. I really want everybody to go follow it.
Thank you. It's Instagram.com/Baruti. Within my social media, you've got Baruti is Twitter, Baruti Facebook, Baruti Instagram. And if you dare to follow me on Snapchat, is I am Baruti in terms of Snapchat.
Mystical experience in 30 seconds or less.
But only for the really brave.
Oh my goodness. I can imagine.
Yeah, but generally all across the social media, it's just Baruti. Snapchat is the first, and I think even with Tumblr, it's Baruti. Pinterest, as a matter of fact, the Pinterest story, I've got it. It's okay if I share this one story.
Absolutely.
Riley and I met before we actually met. Pinterest. I shared.
Yes, I forgot about this story.
Yeah, I have this Inspirational Minds page that I shared on Pinterest several years ago. I don't do much with it now. And Albert Pike is there. And I shared one of his quotes about him as a magnum opus. And then David Riley says, wasn't it magnum opus? Is magnum opus? It's the funniest thing. And it wasn't until maybe a year after I met David that I realized this name sounds familiar. And one day I just happened to be on Pinterest. I opened it up and I started laughing because there's David Riley's name. And David tells a story that, it's part of, his desire that all of the really cool people be brought to Cambridge and to be brought to Amicable Lodge. And it's really cool how it happened. And, David tells it much better than I do, surely. But that to me was a very powerful experience. And to me, it's illustrative of how when we choose to open ourselves to the possibility of being and doing better, as Goethe would say, the universe conspires to make it happen. So again, my wife and I are here in Cambridge as a result of conspiring on behalf of the great architect of the universe, and probably David Riley.
The funny thing about that is that I think I was on Pinterest for all of like 45 seconds because I was like, what's this Pinterest thing? Nathan has a huge Pinterest account. He collects things on. And I was like, well, I'll give it a try. Nathan seems to be really into it. And like a lot of things in my life, it didn't click for me. So I was on it for like, you can go look at my Pinterest account now. I haven't signed in for probably 2 to 3 years. It has a very small collection of stuff, just enough for me to meet Baruti.
So you're a Mason at that time, right? Mm-hmm. You're a Mason at that time.
Yeah. This would have been, I was raised August 18, 2009. So this must have been maybe 2010 or 11 that I opened a Pinterest account. And I shared this page. And, there's so many people that follow that page on Pinterest. I do very little with it. But it was rather interesting to have this experience of this person saying to me, as a matter of fact, I'm pulling up the page now and I would like to do David Riley justice on this one.
Please don't do me justice. There's nothing more terrifying than the idea of justice being done to me.
It just says, I write about, Albert Pike's standard thing and his magnum opus, Morals and Dogma. And then David Riley quips, it's 5 years ago now, mind you. I thought magnum opus was his magnum opus. So yeah, it was really funny. It's really funny. And again, David and I met, as a matter of fact, the night that we moved here, my wife and I moved to Cambridge. We arrived Friday, May 31, 2013. And there was a brother from Amicable Lodge whom I've not seen since that was having they had a night out at some bar on Tremont Street in Boston. And one of the brothers with whom we were staying at the time, as my wife and I were preparing for our flat to be cleaned up and so we could prepare to move in, he invited us to this event. And we're sitting at this room in this bar, I forget where it was, pub, I guess, pub or bar in Tremont. And we're all there. And Nathan was there, David was there, JR was there, Duggan, Gerbs was there, and I forget someone else was there. A couple other people were there. My wife and I were there. And it was the coolest thing because when we left, and as my wife and I are walking back to the flat where we were staying, she says, honey, I think you found your guys. And it was the coolest thing because, we're in the home of Freemasonry in the country. And I meet these guys from the famed Amicable Lodge. And the rest, as they say, is history. And so, again, let's just say that night was really powerful on many levels. And I've had many discussions with the brothers that were there subsequent to that night. And yeah, Cambridge is definitely home in terms of what we're doing. It's good stuff.
I've long claimed I don't collect anything. There's people who collect various kinds of. Yeah, okay. So I have a small book addiction, but I don't.
You have like 45 shot glasses. Wait, are they all amicable?
They're all
amicable shot glasses.
They're all Masonic because they're from table lodges. See?
Yeah, you don't collect anything. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't collect things. Things collect me. But the one thing I like collecting is people.
Yes.
And I'm very pleased to have added you to my collection, Baruti.
Well, it's an honor to be counted as a friend and a brother. You know, my wife and I moving to Cambridge 2013 to really reconstitute transcendental meditation in the metropolitan area. You know, it's funny, another funny story. There's one of our brothers, Jeremy Gross, whom I knew from Facebook. Again, Facebook is a great connector here. And we'd gone back to Cambridge. We drove back to Iowa from Cambridge. And I realized, oh, he's in Boston, Cambridge. Wow. So I sent him an email. And I said to him that my wife and I are considering, moving there. Maybe you'll connect us with somebody. And he did. And that initial connection of talking with him via Facebook spawned, coming to Amicable and visiting Amicable and finding a guide to aid us in finding our flat and just everything that happened. And so there's a level of, for want of a better word, perfection in things that have happened and things that continue to happen, that if you're humble, you're paying close attention, you realize that on your best day of planning, and I'm a pretty decent planner, on my best day of planning, I could never have planned or orchestrated the beauty that has been our lives since we've been in Cambridge, and in general, for the better part of 9 years now with my wife and how we met, and even coming to Rosicrucianism and things that I studied from undergrad on. There's a level of perfection that's there. And I think that when you open yourself up, as I've said before, to being of service to something that's much greater than you, but yet you've always been a part of, things seem to work well for you. And that's what I can say from my experience. And if others are to be believed, similarly so for themselves.
I've always said that God loves madmen and fools.
Well, I'm not sure which I am.
Yeah. I don't know which I am either, Baruti. I think some days one, other days the other, and I'm not sure which one's the good one. But I do think there is something to be said for being open to the universe telling you where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. The best decisions I've made in my life have been made with my head screaming loudly that I was making a mistake, but my heart telling me that I was doing the right thing. And I'm not saying that you should leap without looking, but I am saying that often leaping is very worthwhile.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can distinctly recall when I was preparing to move from Atlanta to Iowa to continue resume graduate school. And there was one person in particular who said to me they felt I was being selfish. And, for a nanosecond, I thought maybe I was being selfish, yet something within me said, no, you need to go. You need to do this. And I did it. I moved forward. And, I've shared the story with you, David, about how I met my wife and I sensed her in the dining hall before, I actually saw her. And here we are 9 years later, and just how everything unfolded. So when I look back over my life from undergrad now, last 9 years now, you realize there's just this unfoldment that's happening that, when you realize that it's happening, if you're smart, you don't want to derail it. And I think derailing it, let's just say, I don't want to even begin to contemplate what could go wrong if I chose to do something different than what it is that I'm doing now. Because again, there's the level of perfection that's here that, there's so many stories I could share of what Jung would refer to as synchronicities that are just beyond some people's wildest imaginations. And being here in Cambridge is certainly among them.
Well, do you have anything else for Baruti, Nick? Because I don't want to keep him away from Chloe Rose much longer. Never let it be said that Uncle David interfered with a good bedtime story.
I mean, I'm a little concerned that he's trying to convince you to move back to Boston. But I'm trying not to convince myself to move back to Boston. It's like, should I just cut this part out so David never hears it again?
Well, I think for me, and this gets into, in terms of my research, to be very honest, my research would not be what it is and what it's going to be post the dissertation and postgraduate school, what it's going to be. It wouldn't be it were it not for being here in Cambridge and Boston. It just that there is a level of refinement to my own thinking surrounding the topic itself, and having exposure to additional materials and certain private libraries that I can't talk about, but having that access and coming across people and materials that is just so amazing that you realize that, again, on your best day of planning, you could have never planned this, ever, ever, ever.
Nick just freaked out that there's libraries he doesn't know about. And on that,
let's just say there are some libraries some people have out here that are literally amazing, and I'll just say it that way. So that's all I'll say.
We're gonna close, but when we go off the air, you and I are gonna have a talk.
So, Baruti KMT-Sisouvong, raised August 18th, 2009, and raising consciousness ever since then. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope that something resonates with listeners, something of is of value that's there. If it is, great. If not, that's okay too. I have fun talking with friends, so this is good.
And when you get your dissertation finished, we'll put a link by this episode. I'm sure that's thrilling for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
The fantastic photography on our website is courtesy of Brother Aaron Sherman. The theme song, still under development.
But still amazing. We're still very grateful for it.
Is composed by worshipful Christopher Duggan. Hey, Baruti, next time you see Duggan, smack him upside the head and tell him to send me the finished theme song.
I will definitely let him know that you are seeking the theme song.
Well, have you emailed him?
I Facebooked him. Our website is maintained, curated, and lovingly tended by Brother Nicholas Harvey. We are grateful to our Patreon sponsors, Nicholas Harvey, Jason Savlik, Uriah Edwards, Arthur Shingling. I'm so sorry, Arthur. Patrick Harvey, and Christopher Patty. To become a Patreon sponsor, visit our website at 3distinctknots.org, where you will find additional episodes and other content. For your esoteric and Masonic t-shirt needs, visit Vitriol Shop. There's a link on our website. An example is, wow, you should get a modeling credit for this.
I know.
And use the code 3DK, that's the number 3, letter K, DK, 3DK 2017 for 15% off your order. Essential canine supervision for this episode was provided by Raksha. The opinions expressed in this podcast and on our website are those of the individual contributors and do not represent the opinions of any lodge, Grand Lodge, or other Masonic body, except for possibly the Masonic Rosicrucian College of Utah.
Hell, no, don't.
Because Jason Mitchell said he was going to make us all official and stuff, remember?
Gosh.
I'm David Riley, and I'm incredibly thankful to the brothers that have made this podcast and my Masonic journey so rich, interesting, challenging, and fulfilling. I hope 3 Distinct Knocks has helped you make some daily progress in Freemasonry. Thank you for listening.